The rain hammered against the tall windows of the Hayes and Associates building like 1,000 unspoken accusations, each drop blurring the neon lights of downtown Monroe into a watery haze. Savannah froze in her chair, her fingers still hovering over the keyboard, as the door clicked shut behind Eleanor Hayes with a finality that echoed through the empty floor. "For once, just be honest," Eleanor said, her voice low and steady, carrying the weight of all the late nights and stolen glances that had built to this moment, her silhouette framed against the storm like a shadow ready to swallow them both whole. Savannah's heart slammed against her ribs, the office suddenly too small, the air thick with the scent of damp earth seeping through the vents and the faint trace of Eleanor's perfume, jasmine and something sharper like resolve. She had stayed late 100 times before, poring over contracts for the family's old lumber mill accounts, telling herself it was ambition, not the pull of those blue eyes across the conference table. But tonight, with the clock ticking past 10 and the rest of the firm long gone, Eleanor's words hung between them like a live wire, sparking memories Savannah had buried deep under layers of Southern politeness and small-town secrets. It started 6 months ago in the sticky heat of a Louisiana July, when Savannah first walked into Hayes and Associates fresh out of her associate's program at Louisiana Tech. Monroe wasn't New York or even Baton Rouge. It was a town where the Washita River wound lazy through cotton fields and pecan groves, where Sunday suppers at the First Baptist Church still whispered about whose daddy had lost the family farm to the banks. Savannah's own roots tangled in that soil. Her father a retired high school coach with a limp from too many Friday night games. Her mother a librarian who quoted Faulkner like scripture. They had raised her in a brick rancher on the edge of town, where the American dream meant a steady job and a ring on your finger by 25. But Savannah had always felt like the odd stitch in that quilt, her dreams stitched with threads of something unnamed, something that made her linger too long in the aisles of the local bookstore, tracing the spines of novels about women who loved fiercely and without apology. Eleanor Hayes was the firm's founding partner, a name synonymous with old money and quiet power in Monroe. At 42, she carried the legacy of her grandfather's timber empire like a crown she both wore and resented. Sharp suits tailored in Savannah, boardrooms filled with men who nodded at her ideas but credited her charm. Her husband, Harlan, was a state senator from Shreveport, a man whose smile gleamed like polished oak but whose absences stretched longer each year, filled with committee meetings that smelled of bourbon and backroom deals. Eleanor had built the firm to escape the gilded cage of senatorial wife, turning Hayes and Associates into a bulwark against the town's whispers about her childless marriage and her habit of hosting fundraisers that drew crowds from as far as New Orleans. Their first real conversation happened over a stack of foreclosure files in the firm's dusty archive room, the air heavy with the must of forgotten ledgers. Savannah had been tasked with digitizing the old records, her sleeves rolled up against the July humidity that clung like a second skin. Eleanor appeared like a ghost in the doorway, her blouse crisp despite the heat, holding 2 glasses of sweet tea, condensation beaded on the sides. "You missed the lunch rush at Pearl's," Eleanor said, handing her a glass, her fingers brushing Savannah's in a way that sent a jolt through her, innocent as lightning. "Everyone's talking about the new girl who's faster with Excel than old Mr. Thibodeau was with his adding machine." Savannah took the glass, her cheeks warming under the fluorescent hum. "Just trying to earn my keep, ma'am. My daddy always said idle hands build bad habits." Eleanor leaned against a shelf, her laugh soft, like wind through magnolia leaves. "Call me Eleanor. And your daddy sounds like a man who's seen too many losing seasons." They talked then, about the river's floods that swallowed half the county every spring, about how the mill's closure had gutted families like Savannah's own. Eleanor's eyes held a depth that pulled at something in Savannah, a mirror to her own quiet rebellions. The poetry notebooks hidden under her mattress, the way she'd drive to the state line on weekends just to breathe air that didn't carry the weight of expectation. From there, the late nights became ritual. A client merger from Texas demanded round-the-clock revisions. A zoning dispute with the parish council stretched into dawn strategy sessions. Savannah told herself it was the work, the thrill of closing deals that kept the firm's lights on, the respect in Eleanor's voice when she said, "You've got a gift for seeing the cracks others miss." But it was more. It was the way Eleanor's hand would rest on her shoulder during presentations, a touch that lingered just a beat too long, igniting a fire Savannah had only ever felt in stolen moments alone, imagining lives beyond the picket fences of Monroe. The town watched, of course. Monroe thrived on its undercurrents. Gossip flowed faster than the Washita after a storm. At the weekly chamber meeting in the courthouse square, Harlan Hayes would clap Savannah on the back, his grip firm as a politician's promise. "Eleanor's got you working miracles, young lady. Don't let her run you ragged." His eyes, though, would flick to his wife across the room, a question unspoken. Savannah's mother, overhearing at the beauty parlor, would cluck her tongue. "That woman's got more on her plate than a Thanksgiving turkey. You watch yourself, sugar. Ambition's a fine thing, but it don't pay the preacher's salary." Savannah pushed it down, the warnings, the what-ifs. She was 28, single after a string of polite dates with boys from the chamber choir, men who talked football and futures in measured tones. Her secret wasn't the work. It was the ache that bloomed when Eleanor leaned close over a spreadsheet, her breath warm against Savannah's ear as she pointed out a clause. "Here, tighten this. Make it unbreakable." Unbreakable. The word haunted her drives home. The radio crooning Patsy Cline under a canopy of live oaks draped in Spanish moss. Tonight, as the storm raged, that ache cracked open. Eleanor crossed the office in 3 measured steps, her heels silent on the carpet worn thin by years of pacing. She perched on the edge of Savannah's desk, close enough that Savannah could see the faint lines etched around her eyes, laugh lines or worry or both. The computer screen glowed between them, casting blue shadows on Eleanor's face. "You've been avoiding me," Eleanor said, not a question, her voice threading through the rain's drumbeat. "Ever since the gala last month." "What did I do?" Savannah's throat tightened. The gala, Harlan's big fundraiser at the Monroe Country Club, crystal chandeliers dripping light over gowns and cigar smoke. She'd worn a simple navy dress borrowed from her cousin in Ruston, feeling like an imposter among the wives with their pearl strands and knowing smiles. Eleanor had found her on the veranda, away from the string quartet's swell, a cigarette unlit between her fingers. "You looked beautiful," Eleanor had murmured, the words slipping out like a confession, her gaze lingering on Savannah's lips before snapping away to the river below. Harlan had called her back inside then, his arm possessive around her waist, but the moment lingered, electric and forbidden. Now, in the office's hush, Savannah forced words past the lump in her chest. "It wasn't you. It's everything. The firm, the town. My family expects me to settle down, find someone steady. And you've got Harlan, the legacy. What are we even doing here?" Eleanor's hand reached out, hesitating before cupping Savannah's cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that shattered the last of her defenses. "Honesty, Savannah. That's all I'm asking. Because if we're pretending this is just work, then God help me, I'm the biggest fool in Washita Parish." The kiss came then, soft at first, a question in the press of lips, then deepening as Savannah leaned in, the world narrowing to the taste of salt and storm on Eleanor's mouth. It was everything she'd imagined in the dark hours of her bedroom, hands tangled in sheets, heart racing with the sin of wanting. But as they broke apart, gasping, the rain seemed to mock them, sheets of it slamming the glass like judgment from the heavens. In that moment, suspended between surrender and fear, Savannah glimpsed the precipice they teetered on, the chasm of societal chains that bound them tighter than any embrace. Monroe's watchful eyes, the Hayes name etched in brass plaques downtown, her mother's Bible on the nightstand. Yet for the first time, honesty felt like freedom, fragile as a moth's wing against the coming dawn. The weeks that followed blurred into a secret rhythm, a dance of stolen hours amid the firm's relentless churn. Mornings brought the crisp efficiency of boardroom briefings, where Savannah presented case analyses with a voice steady as steel, her notes typed in fonts that hid the tremble in her handwriting from the night before. Afternoons dissolved into client lunches at the depot, the old train station turned bistro, where Eleanor played the gracious host, her laughter light as she charmed bankers from Baton Rouge. But evenings, those were theirs, veiled in the guise of overtime. One such night, under a harvest moon that silvered the pecan orchards lining Highway 165, they drove out to Eleanor's cabin on Bayou Darbon. It was a relic from her grandfather's days, a weathered pine structure with a wraparound porch overlooking the cypress knees rising from the water like ancient sentinels. Harlan called it her fool's retreat, a place for solitude he never joined. For Savannah, it became sanctuary, the air thick with the hum of katydids and the scent of marsh mud, far from Monroe's prying lanterns. They arrived as twilight bled into indigo, Eleanor's old Jeep rumbling to a stop on the gravel drive. She killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the frog chorus. "Come on," she said, voice husky from the day's depositions, leading Savannah inside by the hand. The cabin's interior was sparse. A stone fireplace stacked with split oak, a kitchenette with mismatched mugs from travels Eleanor never spoke of, a loft bedroom reached by a ladder that creaked under their weight. They cooked gumbo from memory, Eleanor chopping okra with a rhythm honed from childhood summers in the kitchens of black women who had raised the Hayes daughters while their mothers chaired garden clubs. Savannah stirred the roux, the flour blooming dark under her wooden spoon, sharing stories of her grandmother's recipes, the ones passed down with warnings about city girls who forget their roots. Laughter came easy then, bubbling up like the pot simmer, easing the knot Savannah carried low in her belly. But as they ate by lantern light, forks scraping against enamel plates, the conversation turned, as it always did, to the shadows they couldn't outrun. "Harlan's pushing for another campaign," Eleanor said, staring into the steam rising from her bowl. "More fundraisers, more schmoozing. He says it's for us, for the firm, the future. But it's his future, always has been." Savannah set her spoon down, the clink sharp in the quiet. "And you? What do you want, Eleanor? Beyond the deals and the dinners?" Eleanor's eyes met hers, blue as the bayou at noon, holding a storm of their own. "You. This. A life where I don't have to choose between the woman I married for duty and the one who makes me feel alive." She reached across the table, fingers interlacing with Savannah's, calluses from signing contracts rough against soft skin. "But Monroe doesn't bend easy. My family's donated to every preacher from here to Vicksburg. Divorce? It'd be like setting fire to the mill all over again." The weight of it settled then, heavier than the humid air pressing through the screens. Savannah thought of her own chains, her father's pride in her good job, the eligible sons of deacons who sent flowers after church socials, their invitations laced with the expectation of white lace and vows. She'd nodded through them all, her smiles practiced, her heart a locked diary under the floorboards. Coming out in Monroe wasn't a declaration. It was detonation, scattering shrapnel through family trees that traced back to the Confederacy. Yet in the cabin's glow, with Eleanor's thumb tracing circles on her palm, Savannah felt the stirrings of rebellion. They climbed to the loft later, shedding clothes like old skins, bodies entwining under a quilt stitched with faded stars. Eleanor's touch was reverent, mapping Savannah's curves not with possession but with wonder, whispers of beautiful, and mine lost in the night's embrace. For hours they were unmoored, adrift in a world of their making, where class lines blurred and gender's rigid script dissolved into sighs. Dawn crept in with mocking gentleness, gilding the cypress in gold. As they dressed, Eleanor paused at the window, watching a heron stalk the shallows. "We can't keep this up forever," she murmured, more to the bayou than to Savannah. "Harlan's suspicions are sharpening. And your mother called the office yesterday, asking about that boy from the bank." Savannah's stomach twisted. Her mother, with her wire-rimmed glasses and endless patience for overdue books, had always sensed the silences in her daughter's letters home. "He's nice, Mama. Steady." The lie tasted bitter even now. Back in Monroe, the town closed in like kudzu. At the firm, whispers slithered through the break room, about Eleanor's favorite protégé, about how Savannah's promotion to junior partner seemed awfully swift. Old Mr. Thibodeau, retired but still lunching at the club, cornered her one afternoon outside the post office. "Careful, girl. Ambition's a double-edged saw in these parts. Cut too deep and you bleed out." She laughed it off, but the words lodged like splinters. Evenings brought evasion. Coded texts about file reviews, drives to outlying parishes where no one knew the Hayes name. But the pull of honesty Eleanor had demanded that rainy night grew insistent, a tide eroding the banks of their pretense. It crested unexpectedly 2 weeks later, at the annual Harvest Festival on the courthouse lawn. Strings of Edison bulbs swayed in the breeze, casting warm pools over booths hawking funnel cakes and boiled peanuts. Harlan Hayes manned the political tent, his baritone booming over promises of tax cuts and school bonds, a crowd of farmers and shopkeepers nodding like congregants. Eleanor stood beside him, the picture of poise in a sundress the color of ripe peaches, her arm looped through his as cameras flashed. Savannah volunteered at the library's book sale, stacking paperbacks while stealing glances across the green. Their eyes met once, a spark in the dusk, but Eleanor looked away first, her smile tightening for the lens. When the fiddles struck up for square dancing, Harlan pulled Eleanor into the fray, their steps practiced, her laughter forced as he twirled her under the lights. Savannah turned away, the ache blooming sharp. She slipped to the edges, where the river lapped at the embankment, fireflies winking like conspirators. Footsteps crunched behind her. Eleanor breathless, her cheeks flushed from the dance. "I couldn't," Eleanor started, then pulled Savannah into the shadows of a willow, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling. "Harlan's announcing his run tonight. Full commitment. And I told him I'd stand by him." The words landed like a slap, cold and final. Savannah stepped back, the festival's joy a distant roar. Stand by him? After everything? Eleanor's face crumpled, tears carving tracks through her makeup. "It's the firm, the donors. If I leave now, it all crumbles. You included." She reached for Savannah's hand, but Savannah pulled away, the betrayal a chasm widening between them. "You're choosing the cage," Savannah whispered, voice breaking. "And I'm done pretending it's home." She walked away then, the fiddles mocking her retreat, the river's murmur a dirge for what might have been. Behind her, Eleanor's silhouette blurred with the willows, a ghost in the gathering dark. The fracture lingered like a bruise, tender and discolored, coloring every interaction in shades of what could have been. At the firm, Savannah buried herself in work, her desk a fortress of case files and coffee rings, amendments drafted with mechanical precision. She arrived early, left late. Alone now, the office's hush a companion more trustworthy than whispers. Eleanor respected the distance at first, her greetings clipped in hallways, her emails all business. Review attached. Urgent. But the pull was magnetic, unavoidable in a town as small as Monroe, where paths crossed like veins in a leaf. Harlan's announcement dominated the headlines, splashed across the Washita Citizen, and echoed in radio spots from Shreveport to Alexandria. "A vision for Louisiana's heartland," the banners read, his face beaming from podiums draped in state flags. Eleanor appeared at his side in every photo, her smile a mask Savannah knew too well, the one that hid the tremor in her hands after a long day. The campaign trail swallowed them. Ribbon cuttings in farm co-ops, debates in high school auditoriums where Harlan thundered about family values and economic revival. Savannah caught glimpses on the local news, Eleanor's poise unbroken, but her eyes, those blue depths, held a hollowness that twisted Savannah's gut. Her own life unraveled in quiet ways. Her mother noticed the silences over Sunday calls, the way Savannah's voice thinned when asked about prospects. "You're not getting any younger, honey," her mother said one evening, the line crackling with static from the old rotary phone. "That nice Mr. Landry from the feed store asked after you at choir practice." Savannah murmured agreements, her free hand tracing the scar on her palm from a childhood fall off the porch swing. A reminder of freedoms lost to gravity's pull. The firm buzzed with opportunity, Harlan's run funneling clients like floodwaters, developers eyeing riverfront parcels, unions hedging bets on labor laws. Savannah's caseload swelled, her name attached to briefs that landed on Eleanor's desk. One afternoon, as thunder rumbled distant over Arkansas, Eleanor summoned her to the corner office, the door ajar like an invitation laced with peril. "We need to talk about the Delta Holdings merger," Eleanor said, gesturing to the leather chairs, her tone all executive steel. But as Savannah sat, files in lap, Eleanor's facade cracked, a flicker in her gaze, the way her fingers drummed the armrest like a Morse code of regret. They discussed clauses and contingencies, voices measured, but the air hummed with unsaid words. When Savannah rose to leave, Eleanor's hand caught her wrist, light as a breath. "Wait, please." The door clicked shut, the locks turn a echo of that first rainy night. Eleanor leaned against it, shoulders sagging, the weight of weeks evident in the shadows under her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to end like this. The festival." I panicked. "Harlan's world is all I've known, but you're the first thing that's felt real in years." Savannah's resolve wavered, the touch igniting embers she'd banked carefully. "Real? Or just another secret to tuck away?" "I'm tired of being the footnote, Eleanor. The firm, the campaign, they're your anchors. But they're drowning me." Eleanor's response was a step forward, then another, until they were inches apart, the desk a barrier no longer. "Then teach me to swim." The kiss was desperate, a clash of need and apology, hands fisting in fabric as if to hold back the tide. They tumbled onto the leather sofa, the merger files scattering like fallen leaves, the storm outside mirroring the one within. Afterward, tangled and spent, they lay in the dimming light, the office clock ticking accusations. Eleanor's head on Savannah's chest, listening to the frantic rhythm beneath. "I filed papers last night," she whispered, quietly through a firm in New Orleans. "Harlan doesn't know yet." Savannah's breath caught, hope warring with dread. "And the fallout? The town, the donors?" "Let them come," Eleanor said, fierce now, lifting her head to meet Savannah's eyes. "I've spent my life building walls for other people. It's time I tore one down for myself." The words ignited something fierce in Savannah, a spark long dimmed by caution. They dressed in hurried whispers, plans forming like storm clouds. A weekend away, perhaps to the Smokies in Tennessee, where accents blurred and no one knew the Hayes legacy. But as they parted in the hallway, Eleanor's phone buzzed, Harlan's name on the screen, his voice tinny through the speaker when she answered. "Darling, the Shreveport rally's a go. Pack your blues." The call ended and Eleanor's face hardened, the vulnerability shuddered. "Duty calls," she said, a bitter edge to the words. Savannah nodded, retreating to her desk, the afterglow souring into resolve. This time she wouldn't wait for the wave to crash. The conflict escalated at the firm's holiday mixer, held in the ballroom of the Landry Hotel, chandeliers dripping crystal over tuxedos and cocktail dresses. Monroe's elite turned out in force, bankers with cufflinks engraved in Latin, widows clutching pearls like lifelines. Harlan held court by the bar, his toast to family and fortitude drawing cheers, Eleanor at his elbow, her gown emerald silk that caught the light like envy. Savannah arrived late, her black sheath simple, a borrowed necklace of garnets at her throat, a gift from her grandmother, heavy with history. She mingled with associates, small talk about caseloads and crawfish boils, but her eyes sought Eleanor across the room. When their gazes locked, it was a current pulling despite the crowd. Harlan intercepted her midway through a waltz, his bow courtly. "Miss Savannah, you've been a godsend to Eleanor this season. Care for a spin?" His hand was warm, paternal, but his eyes probed, as if sensing the fracture lines. She danced with him, steps light on the polished oak, his cologne overwhelming, cigar and aftershave, the scent of power plays. "Eleanor's lucky to have you," he said, voice low under the orchestra's swell. "But watch the late nights. A girl like you needs more than ledgers to warm her bed." The implication landed sly, a warning wrapped in chivalry. Savannah murmured thanks, excusing herself to the veranda, the December chill biting through her wrap. Footsteps followed, Eleanor's, her heels muffled on the carpet runner. "He suspects," Savannah said without turning, the river below a black ribbon under street lamps. Eleanor joined her at the railing, hands gripping iron filigree. "Not us. The distance. He's offering me a way out, some counselor in Baton Rouge," rekindling the spark. Her laugh was hollow, echoing off the water, as if sparks are the problem. Savannah turned, the cold forgotten in the heat of proximity. "Then end it. For real." Eleanor's hand found hers, hidden in the folds of her skirt. "Soon. After the primary. Promise me you'll wait." The plea hung a thread fraying. Inside, Harlan's voice rose in another toast, the crowd's applause a wave crashing. Savannah squeezed Eleanor's fingers, then let go. "I can't promise what I don't control anymore." She slipped back into the ballroom alone, the music swelling around her like a cage. That night, in her apartment above the dry cleaners on Desired Street, Savannah pulled out the poetry notebook, pages filling with lines jagged as lightning. "Walls we build become our graves, /love the hammer, truth the nail. Sleep came fitful, dreams of bayous swallowing whole the lives they might claim." The primary loomed like a guillotine, 2 months of rallies and robocalls. Harlan's lead narrowed, whispers of scandals, old land deals gone sour, nipping at his heels. Eleanor threw herself into the fray, strategy calls at dawn, her office a war room of polling data and press releases. Savannah contributed from afar, briefs on election law airtight, but their encounters were charged minefields. A brush in the copy room, eyes locking over lukewarm coffee. It broke on a sleet-lashed February morning, the news breaking like ice. A leak to the Times-Picayune. Anonymous sources claiming Harlan's ties to a corrupt developer. The firm reeled, clients fleeing like rats from flood. Eleanor called an emergency meeting, her face ashen under the conference room fluorescence. "We're containing it," she said, voice steady for the staff. But her eyes found Savannah's across the table, pleading. After, as the team dispersed, she pulled Savannah into the supply closet. The door barely latched. "This is it," Eleanor breathed, forehead to the doorframe. "The end. Harlan's done, and so am I." Relief flooded Savannah, mingled with terror. "What now?" Eleanor turned, cupping her face. "We go. Together. I've got a cousin in Portland, Oregon. Quiet life, no legacies. Start over." The vision unfurled. Rain-slick streets of evergreens, coffee shops where hands could hold without whispers, a firm of their own, small but theirs. Savannah nodded, tears hot. Yes. But as they kissed, fierce and claiming, a knock shattered the moment, Harlan's voice muffled but urgent. "Eleanor? We need to talk." She pulled away, composing herself, the mask slipping back. "Go out first. I'll handle this." Savannah emerged into the hallway, heart pounding, only to find Harlan waiting, his face thunderous. "A word, Miss Savannah." In his temporary office, borrowed from a partner on sabbatical, he paced like a caged panther. "I know about the affair," he said flatly, no preamble, his eyes cold as the sleet outside. "Eleanor's been distracted, and your late nights don't add up." Denial rose, but he waved it off. "Save it. I've got eyes everywhere in this town. But here's the deal. You walk away clean. Resign quietly, take a reference to any firm in the state. Or I bury you both. Ethics complaints leaks to the bar. Eleanor's career ends, and yours before it starts." The threat coiled, venomous. Savannah stood tall, voice even. "Threaten all you want, Senator. But love isn't a ledger you balance." He laughed, bitter. "Love? This is Monroe, girl. It's survival." He slid a severance check across the desk, the amount generous, insulting. "Take it. And remember, family first." She left without touching it, the corridor blurring with rage and grief. Eleanor met her at the elevators, question in her eyes. "What did he say?" Savannah's voice cracked. "Everything. And nothing." The doors closed, sealing them in descent, the building's lights flickering like dying stars. The accusation hung over them like storm clouds refusing to break, Harlan's words a poison seeping into every corner of their fragile world. Savannah tendered her resignation the next morning, typed on firm letterhead with excuses about pursuing opportunities in Baton Rouge. Eleanor pleaded over coffee in the firm's back stairwell, steam curling between them like smoke signals. "Don't do this. We fight together." But Savannah's resolve had hardened, forged in the fire of that closet confrontation. "He'll destroy you to save face. And me? I'm collateral. Better I go now on my terms." She folded the letter, sealing it with tape that stuck like finality, her fingers lingering on the envelope as if it held pieces of her heart. Eleanor nodded, tears unshed, her hand pressing a key into Savannah's palm. The cabin's spare, cold metal against skin. "Use it. Whenever. It's yours now." The stairwell echoed with their goodbye, footsteps descending separately, the distance between them widening with each step. Monroe turned cruel in the aftermath, its smallness a microscope on their unraveling. Harlan weathered the scandal with the grace of a statesman, blaming political operatives in press conferences, his poll numbers rebounding on sympathy votes. Whispers followed Savannah to the grocery on North 4th. Poor girl caught in the crossfire, laced with should have known better than to tangle with the haze. Her mother arrived unannounced one Sunday, arms laden with Tupperware of cornbread and collards, her eyes sharp behind glasses. "Sit," she commanded, over iced tea at the Formica table. "The whole town's buzzing like bees in a bonnet. You and Mrs. Hayes." "Mama," Savannah interrupted, voice tight. "It's not what you think." Her mother's hand covered hers, callous from shelving tomes. "Child, I raised you. I know what I think. And I know what it costs." She spoke then of her own youth, a cousin in the 70s who fled to California after a scandal with the choir director's wife, letters home sparse until silence swallowed them. "Love like that. It's a river deep and swift. But this town builds dams. You decide if you drown or learn to swim." The confession cracked something in Savannah, tears spilling hot. Her mother held her, humming an old hymn, the kitchen filling with the scent of yeast and earth. "Go if you must. But come back whole or not at all." Emboldened, Savannah drove to the cabin that night, the bayou a silver thread under headlights. The key turned smooth, the door swinging open to dust motes dancing in moonlight. She built a fire, flames licking logs as she unpacked a duffel. Clothes, her notebook, a photo of her parents' wedding faded and framed. Sleep came in fits, dreams of Eleanor's hands, Harlan's glare, the river rising to claim them all. Eleanor reached out in fragments, a bouquet of magnolias left at her door, petals bruised. A voicemail at midnight, voice thick. I ended it. Papers served. He's furious, but it's done. Savannah played it on loop, the words a bomb and a blade, tempting her to bridge the gap. The breaking point came at the firm's spring audit, a mandatory affair in the boardroom with accountants from Little Rock. Savannah attended as a courtesy, her severance bought discretion, but the air crackled when she entered. Eleanor looked wrecked. Hair pinned haphazardly, suit rumpled, directing juniors with clipped commands. Harlan was absent, campaigning in the Delta, but his shadow loomed in the empty chair at the head. During a recess, Eleanor cornered her in the ladies' lounge, mirrors reflecting their fractured selves. I need you back. The merger's collapsing without your eye. And I need you. Savannah's heart lurched, but anger surged. Need? Or convenience? You chose him once. What's changed? Eleanor's face paled. Everything. I told him about us in the car after the primary win. He laughed at first, then. God, the things he said. About you, about me being confused. I walked out. Left the ring on the mantel. The rawness in her voice undid Savannah, arms wrapping around Eleanor as sobs shook her. I'm sorry, Savannah whispered, holding tight. For running. For doubting. They clung there, the lounge's tile cold underfoot, until a flush echoed from the stalls, Mr. Thibodeau clearing his throat awkwardly. They separated, composing faces, but the reconnection hummed. A current reignited. The affair reignited in secrecy's embers, meetings masked as consultations, drives to neutral ground. A motel in Bastrop, anonymous under buzzing neons. There, in rooms smelling of bleach and regret, they reclaimed stolen time. Bodies a language of forgiveness. Eleanor traced Savannah's spine with fingers that trembled less each time, whispering plans. Portland. A fresh start. You, me, a practice by the Willamette. Savannah dreamed it too, rain instead of humidity, clients who saw partners, not pedigrees. But reality intruded like kudzu. Harlan's divorce filing public spectacle, splashed across society pages. Senator Hayes seeks amicable split amid campaign pressures. The subtext screamed betrayal, fingers pointing at the young associate in bylines. The town closed ranks. Clients pulled contracts, the firm's halls echoing empty. Eleanor's father, ailing in his Delta plantation, called with gravel voice. You've shamed us, girl. The name's all we have. She hung up, curling into Savannah on the cabin floor, firelight painting their skin in gold. Was it worth it? She asked, voice small. Savannah pulled her close. Every scar. The climax brewed in late April, dogwood shedding petals like confetti for a funeral. Harlan summoned Eleanor to the family home on Forsyth Avenue, a Greek revival mansion with columns white as bone. She went alone against Savannah's pleas, returning at dusk with a split lip and eyes wild. He hit me, she said, collapsing into Savannah's arms on the porch swing, the chains creaking protest. Said I'd ruined him, the campaign, the legacy. Blamed you, called you. Filth. Rage boiled in Savannah, hot and unyielding. She drove them to the sheriff's office, Eleanor's statement halting under fluorescent glare, the deputy, a boy from her high school pew, taking notes with averted eyes. We'll look into it, ma'am, he said, the words hollow as the town's justice. That night, Harlan's retaliation struck. A private investigator's report emailed to the Bar Association. Anonymous but damning allegations of ethical breaches, inappropriate relations, tainting the firm's integrity. Savannah's license hung in limbo, inquiries from Baton Rouge promising scrutiny. Panic set in, Eleanor's hands shaking as she packed the cabin. We leave tonight. Sell what we can, start over. But Savannah hesitated at the door, duffel slung over shoulder. And run? Let him win. Eleanor's eyes flashed. Survive. There's a difference. The argument spilled into the bayou's edge, voices rising over the peepers' chorus. This isn't survival, Savannah cried. It's exile. I won't let Monroe define us as cowards. Eleanor grabbed her arms, nails digging crescents. Then what? Fight a man with the governor's ear? You'll lose everything, your career, your family. And you. Savannah shot back. Hide behind silence again? The slap came swift, Eleanor's palm connecting with cheek, the sting blooming red. They froze, horror dawning. Eleanor's hand to mouth, tears streaming. God, Savannah, I'm sorry. I can't lose you too. Savannah touched the welt. Pain secondary to the heartbreak. You already have. She turned, walking into the dark, the bayou swallowing her footsteps, leaving Eleanor silhouetted against the cabin's glow, a figure diminished by her own hand. The betrayal cut deepest not in the strike, but in the mirror it held. Their love warped by fear, lashing out like the very chains they sought to break. The slap echoed through the days that followed, a phantom sting that colored Savannah's every mirror glance, a reminder of fractures too deep for apologies to mend. She returned to her apartment above the dry cleaners, the hum of washers below a lullaby of isolation, boxes half-packed for a move she no longer believed in. Portland faded to a mirage, shimmering just out of reach, while Monroe's grip tightened like roots in clay soil. Eleanor called ceaselessly at first, voicemails layered with pleas, texts blooming on her phone like desperate wildflowers. I didn't mean it. Come back. We fixed this. Savannah deleted them unread, her thumb hovering over block, heart a battlefield of love and self-preservation. The cabin key burned in her drawer, a talisman she couldn't discard, couldn't reclaim. Work became her anchor or its absence. Freelance gigs from old contacts in Ruston, reviewing contracts for small mills teetering on bankruptcy's edge. She drove the backroads, windows down to let the wind scour her thoughts, radio tuned to NPR's measured tones dissecting national scandals that paled against her own. One afternoon in a diner off I-20 she overheard truckers at the counter. Hayes boys done for, wife run off with some skirt from the firm. Laughter followed, coarse as gravel, and Savannah slipped out, while rising the coffee untouched. Her family sensed the storm. Her father appeared on her doorstep with a six-pack and a tackle box, his limp more pronounced in the evening damp. They sat on the stoop, cracking beers under the street lamp's buzz, the Washita murmuring distant. Your mama says you're hurting, he rumbled, voice like thunder rolling far off. Won't pry, but life's games ain't always fair. Sometimes you fumble the ball. Savannah leaned against his shoulder, the flannel worn soft. I fumbled more than that, Daddy. Loved someone I shouldn't. He was quiet long then. Shouldn't? Hell, half my plays were gambles. Won some, lost more. But regret's the real loser. His arm around her solid as oak cracked the dam. She wept then, for the girl who'd hidden poems, for the woman who'd dared to dream. He held her through it, no judgments, just the steady tick of his Timex. Emboldened, she sought counsel from unlikely quarters. Rabbi Leah from the tiny synagogue on Oak Street, a transplant from Brooklyn who'd traded bagels for beignets. Over herbal tea in the rabbi's cluttered parlor, bookshelves groaning with Talmud and Tennessee Williams, Savannah unspooled her tale. The boss's husband, the town's noose. Leah listened, silver hair catching lamplight, her eyes kind but unflinching. Judaism teaches tikkun olam, repairing the world. But you can't mend what's broken if you ignore your own shards. She pressed a worn copy of The Color Purple into Savannah's hands. Read. See yourself in Seeley. Strength isn't in the fight. It's in the standing. The words burrowed deep, stirring a quiet revolution. Savannah began writing, not poems but letters, to the Bar Association, detailing the harassment, the threats, her resignation under duress. To the local paper, an op-ed unsigned at first, on the cost of silence in Southern boardrooms. It ran buried in the features section but ripples spread. Calls from women's groups in Shreveport, a reporter sniffing for more. Eleanor, meanwhile, vanished into seclusion, the firm shuttered temporarily, for renovations. Whispers placed her at her father's plantation, nursing his decline amid feather dusters and faded portraits of stern ancestors. Harlan toured triumphantly, his divorce spun as mutual growth. New polls surging on evangelical endorsements. But cracks showed. A donor pulling funds citing moral lapses. Their paths crossed inevitably at the county courthouse, May's heat pressing heavy as Savannah filed her bar complaint, forms crisp in her folder. Eleanor waited in the hall, thinner, her sundress loose, eyes shadowed like the magnolia shade outside. Savannah, she breathed, stepping forward but halting at the flinch. I saw the piece. It's brave. Savannah's grip tightened on the folder. Brave? Or desperate? You hit me, Eleanor. Not with your fist, with your fear. Eleanor's face crumpled, hands twisting a handkerchief threadbare. I know. Therapy in New Orleans twice a week. Learning to name the anger, not swing it. She swallowed, voice raw. Harlan's countersuit claims alienation of affection. Laughable, but it'll drag us through mud. I won't fight you. Just don't hate me. The plea pierced, old love stirring like silt in still water. Hate's too easy, Savannah said softly. It's the indifference I fear. They parted with a nod, the marble floors echoing hollow, but the encounter lingered, a thread pulling taut. That evening, Savannah drove to the cabin unbidden. Key turning with a click that felt like homecoming. Inside, dust cloaked the furniture, but Eleanor's touch remained. A half-read novel on the side table. Their eyes were watching God, dog-eared at the flood. She stayed the night, fire crackling, writing by flamelight. A letter to Eleanor, unsealed, left on the mantel. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's space to rebuild. If you want it, meet me at Pearl's noon tomorrow. No promises. Just truth. Dawn brought resolve, the bayou mist shrouded as she locked up, heading back to town. Pearl's was packed, lunch rush in full swing. Waitresses in starched aprons ferrying plates of po' boys and red beans. Eleanor arrived on time, sliding into the booth with tentative grace, her smile fragile as spun glass. They ordered sweet tea, the clink of spoons a metronome to halting words. Eleanor spoke first, of Sessions unpacking her marriage's rot, Harlan's control masked as chivalry, of her father's deathbed plea for propriety, ignored in a whisper of finally. Savannah shared the rabbi's wisdom. The letters sent like arrows into the dark. I'm selling the firm, Eleanor said midway through, voice steady. To Thibodeau's nephew. Clean break. Thinking Asheville mountains, not bayous. Space to breathe. Savannah's heart quickened. And us. Eleanor's hand extended across the formica, palm up. If you'll have me. Not as boss or secret. As partner. Equals. Fingers met, warm and sure, the touch of vow unspoken. Outside, Monroe bustled oblivious, but in that booth, under the ceiling fan's lazy whirl, they charted a new map. Tentative lines from Louisiana clay to Carolina ridges. Love no longer a fugitive but a fellow traveler. Yet the tantrum of tantrum came unbidden, Harlan's final lash. A midnight call to Savannah's landline, his voice slurred with scotch. You think you've won? I'll ruin you. Tell your daddy what his golden girl really is. The line went dead, but the venom lingered, prompting a protective order filed at dawn. Eleanor stood with her in the magistrate's chambers, hand in hand, the judge, a woman with gray streaks and kind eyes, nodding through the testimony. Enough, she ruled, the gavel a punctuation. Harlan's empire teetered, endorsements evaporating like dew, his campaign a ghost limping to November. In the weeks that followed, catharsis bloomed. Savannah's op-ed sparked a forum at the library. Women sharing stories of glass ceilings cracked by gender's weight, hands held in solidarity. Eleanor's divorce finalized quietly, assets split with surgical precision, her freedom a quiet triumph. They spent evenings at the cabin, not lovers yet but allies, cooking etouffee, debating routes on folded maps, laughter returning like fireflies at dusk. One night, under stars pricked sharp, Eleanor turned to Savannah by the fire pit. I was wrong to ask you to wait. You taught me to run toward, not away. Savannah leaned in, lips brushing temple. We both did. The moment held tender, the past's wreckage fuel for forward flame. But deeper still, the true shattering loomed, not in blows or betrayals, but in the mirror of societal scars, demanding they face not just each other, but the world remade. Summer unfurled over Monroe like a banner of reluctant forgiveness, the Washita's waters warming to a Baptist's embrace, dogwoods giving way to crepe myrtle's defiant pink. Savannah and Eleanor's reconnection deepened in increments, a bridge rebuilt plank by plank over the chasm of hurt. Mornings found them at the cabin's kitchen table, coffee steaming as they pored over listings. A bungalow in Asheville's Montford district, gingerbread trim and a garden plot for heirloom tomatoes. A small office space downtown, brass plaque envisioning Hayes and Ellis attorneys at law. Ellis, Savannah's mother's maiden name. A nod to roots reclaimed. Her parents visited once, awkward at first over pie on the porch, Her father's nod to Eleanor grudging but genuine. Heard you play a mean game of bridge. Deal me in sometime. Her mother pulled Savannah aside later, eyes misty. She's got steel in her. Like you. The approval settled like rain on parched earth, washing away years of unspoken fears. Harlan's downfall accelerated with autumn's approach, his primary loss a landslide of voter backlash. Scandals unearthed like buried Confederate gold, donors fleeing to saner candidates. He retreated to Shreveport, a consulting firm his consolation, whispers of alimony battles fading into irrelevance. The town, ever pragmatic, moved on. New murals on the levee, a film festival luring hipsters from Austin. But for the women who'd watched, it was vindication quiet as dawn. A reminder that empires built on sand erode under truth's tide. Eleanor's therapy continued, sessions via video from a counselor's loft in New Orleans, unpacking the Hayes inheritance. Generations of women wed for alliances, desires sublimated into charities and cold sheets. I was him in a way, she confessed one evening, rain pattering the cabin roof as they swayed on the porch swing. Control as armor. You stripped it away. Savannah traced the lines of her palm, reading futures and whirls. Armor rusts. Better to feel the wind. Their love rekindled fully on a whim drive to Hot Springs, Arkansas. The Ouachita Mountains rising like benevolent giants. They hiked to a overlook, packs light with water and sandwiches, the trail scented with pine and wild onion. At the summit, vista sprawling to hazy horizons, Eleanor dropped to one knee. Not with ring, but with a pebble smoothed by river where, held like a vow. Marry me? Not today, not in white. But when we're ready, equals out loud. Tears blurred the view. Savannah pulling her up into an embrace fierce as the wind. Yes. To all of it. Portland yielded to Asheville's pull, the mountains a compromise. Close enough for visits home, far enough for reinvention. They closed on the bungalow in September, movers hauling oak desks and quilted bedspreads under a sky bruised with promise. The firm launched modest. Wills for artists, contracts for breweries, clients drawn by word-of-mouth tales of those Louisiana ladies who beat the system. Monroe receded but lingered in holidays. Thanksgiving at her parents', Eleanor passing cornbread with a wink. Her father's stories of 68 championship seasons met with her knowing laughs. Christmas brought a card from the rabbi, enclosed a menorah candle. Light your own way. Challenges arose as they must, bar reinstatement hearings where Savannah faced a panel of stern faces. Her testimony measured, Eleanor's letter of support a cornerstone. A client balked at the partner's arrangement, but they held firm, policy clear. Love no barrier to justice. In quiet nights doubts surfaced. Eleanor's hand trembling over a menu, old controls whispering. Savannah waking to dreams of bayou floods, pulling her under. Yet resilience grew, rooted in shared rituals. Morning runs through Biltmore Village, fog cloaking estates like forgotten scandals. Evenings with wine and wolf, dissecting waves of consciousness. Their intimacy deepened, not in passion's blaze but in the steady burn of companionship. Eleanor's head in Savannah's lap during thunderstorms, stories traded like currency. The story's true awakening came in spring, a year to the day of the cabin slap, on a trip back to Monroe for her cousin's wedding. The reception sprawled under tents by the river, lanterns swaying, fiddles calling dancers to the floor. Harlan lurked at the edges, gaunt in a rented suit, his toast slurred but civil. To new beginnings. Eyes met across the crowd. His to Eleanor's, a flicker of old possession doused by her hand in Savannah's. Later on the veranda, away from the swirl, her mother found them. You too, she said, voice soft with wonder, pressing wildflowers into their palms. Like the women in those books you hide. Brave ones. Savannah hugged her tight. The river's song a benediction. Eleanor watched, included now the outsider's chill thought. They drove north at dawn, the bungalow waiting with open arms. In the garden under crepe myrtle echoes, they planted the wildflowers, roots in Carolina soil, blooms nodding to Louisiana winds. That night, abed with windows cracked to cricket song, Eleanor whispered. We're the story now, not the scandal. Savannah smiled into the dark, heart full. And it's a good one. The tale closed not with fanfare, but with quiet profundity. Two women forged in conflict's fire, emerging not unbroken but beautifully mended. In a world of rigid scripts, classes hierarchies, genders edicts, love's taboos, they scripted their own, a testament to humanity's core. That truth, once voiced, liberates not just the teller, but the listeners left in its wake. Monroe's lessons lingered. K-Dang in betrayals, Kitch-Tin in clashes, but Asheville's hills whispered of Jai Thot, where hearts beat free and love at last was no longer a secret kept, but a life lived. In the end, they taught the world and themselves that the greatest rebellion is simply to be honest, whole, unapologetic.